Tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to create a very simple Pacman game in Scratch. When you open up the Scratch program, the first thing you'll see is this that's on the screen at the moment. As we're creating a Pacman game, we need to delete the sprite that's currently on the screen. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is create the actual background for our game. So we're going to click on this button here that says Stage. We're going to go up to the top and click on the tab that says Background, and then click on Edit. Now the background is anything that doesn't move. Okay, so I'm going to just very quickly select a yellow, not a yellow background. I'm going to select a red background using the paint bucket tool, and then I'm going to start drawing my walls by clicking on this rectangle tool and then choosing an appropriate color. So I'm just very quickly just going to draw some rectangle shapes which are going to represent the walls within my simple Pacman game. I'm just going to do this very quickly, however I would expect you to spend a little bit more time focusing on those little finer details. Here we are. Okay, so that is our basic stage for our Pacman game. The next thing that we need to do is try to create the actual sprite, the Pacman sprite itself. So this little area here where it says New Sprite, I'm going to click on this button that says Paint New Sprite. And Pacman is traditionally yellow, so I'm going to choose the yellow color followed by the circle or the ellipse tool. I'm just going to draw a circle. The size doesn't matter at the moment because we can always change the size. And then I'm going to choose a paintbrush tool, select the color black for its eyes, and then I'm just going to very simply draw a line which is going to represent its mouth. And then I'm going to press OK. And as you can see, a rather large Pacman appears on the screen. Now, I would like my Pacman to open and close its mouth. So I'm going to click on Costumes, and then I'm going to duplicate the costume. And the reason why I'm duplicating the costume is that if you create a new sprite, it might not be in the exact same position, so it's not going to be aligned correctly. So I'm just going to click on Copy and then Edit, and then I'm going to use the eraser tool to very simply just delete this part of the Pacman so that it appears that his mouth is open. And then I'm going to press OK. So as you can see, we've got one sprite with two costumes that opens and closes its mouth when I click on the different costumes. Now we want this to open and close its mouth automatically. So I'm going to create a very simple script that says when the green flag is clicked, forever, we're going to wait less than half a second, and then we're going to switch to the next costume. And when I press the green flag, watch what happens. Pacman sprite very quickly opens and closes his mouth automatically because that's what we've told it to do. Now, as with all good programming, we need to create this sprite with an appropriate name. So I'm going to change the name from Sprite 1, and then I'm going to change it to Pacman. The next thing I need to do is, obviously because Pacman is too big, I'm going to click on this little tool here that says Shrink Sprite, and then I'm going to keep on clicking on the Pacman sprite until I'm happy that it's at an appropriate size, which it is now. Move it over here to the top. Right. Next thing that we need to try and do is get the Pacman to move around the screen, because when I press the keys on the keyboard, nothing is actually happening. So there are many different ways of doing this, but I'm going to show you the fairly kind of simplest way. So I'm going to use this tool here under the control block where it says when space is pressed, but I'm going to change this to the right arrow. So when right arrow key is pressed, I'm going to point in the direction 90. Now 90 from the drop down menu is right, and then we're going to move 10 steps. So when the right arrow key is pressed, we're going to point in the direction 90, which is right, and then we're going to move right steps. So let's give this a go. I'm going to press the right arrow and as you can see, the Pacman is starting to move in the right direction. Now, rather than creating this code again, I'm just simply going to right click, duplicate it, and I'm going to do the same thing for the left arrow. So when the left arrow is pressed, I'm going to point in direction minus 90, which is left, and I'm going to move 10 steps. Now when I press the left key, it moves left, however, it's upside down. So to fix that, all what I'm going to do is press this arrow, this button here that says only face left, right. Now, when I press the right arrow, the Pacman moves towards the right. I want to press the left arrow, the Pacman moves towards the left. But it's not opening and closing its mouth because we haven't pressed the green flag yet. We're then going to very quickly duplicate this code again so that the Pacman can go up. So when the up arrow key is pressed, we're going to point in direction 0, which is up. I'm going to move 10 steps. And finally, last but not least, when the down arrow is pressed, I'm going to point in direction 180, which is down, and then we're going to move 10 steps. And let's see what happens when we press the green flag. So far, the Pacman is opening and closing its mouth. When we press right, it goes right. When we press left, it goes left, down, and up. But as you notice, he's going through the walls, which is not what we want. So I'm just going to create another script that says that if the Pacman is touching the colour blue, we're going to move minus 10 steps. Now minus 10 steps is backwards 10 steps, so that when it touches the walls, it doesn't go through the walls, he just essentially takes a step back. Now rather than creating that script again, I'm just going to right click on it, duplicate, and attach it to my existing code. Now when I press the green flag now, the Pacman opens and closes its mouth. When it moves left, but it doesn't go through the walls anymore, okay, because that's what we've told him or her to do. Okay, the next thing that we need to try to do is create the little sprites which the Pacman is going to eat. Now to do this, we need to create a new sprite. And now I'm going to very simply choose the color black and then use the Ellipse tool again and then just create a simple circle. And again, if it's too big, it's not to worry, because I can use the shrink tool and I can make it a little bit smaller and move it into the correct position. Now before I do anything further, okay, I'm just going to create a variable. Now a variable is something that holds a value. Now we're going to have a feature in our game that keeps the score. So it's going to keep track. Every time it eats one of these black sprites, it's going to add 1 to the score. So we're going to create a variable called score. I'm just going to press OK. Now when under this Pacman sprite, when we start a new game, we want score to be set to 0 because it's a new game. Okay. Now under this sprite here, we're going to create a little script that says that when green flag is clicked, forever, if it is touching the Pacman sprite, we want it to hide. Okay, so let's give this a go. So I'm going to press the green flag. We're going to go to this sprite here, and then once it's touching, it's hid. But as you can see, our score hasn't changed, and when we start a new game, the sprite hasn't reappeared. Okay, so we're going to say that when the green flag is clicked, we're going to show this sprite, and then also when it's touching the Pacman and it hides, we want the score to change by 1. Okay, so let's give this another go. Okay, so I'm going to press the green flag. the black sprite appears, score is set to 0. When it touches, not only does the sprite hide, but score also changes by 1. When we restart the game by pressing the green flag, score changes to 0 and this sprite reappears. Now rather than copying this or creating this sprite all over again, we're very simply just going to duplicate it. Duplicate it and move it into the position that we want it to appear. And we're just going to keep on doing that, okay, a number of times until we're happy that we have enough sprites in our game to make it fairly challenging for the person who's going to be creating it. Now rather than you guys just watching me duplicate code over and over again, I'm just going to create just 1 or 2 more, just so that you get the general gist of it, so that you know what you are doing. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that, but I expect you guys to obviously add more sprites. So if we just test to see if this is working, I'm going to press the green flag, score is set to 0. I'm just going to try and eat these sprites that are on the screen. Now as you can see, not only are they disappearing, but the score is also increasing. So score has increased to 7. When we stop the game and we start it, not only do the sprites reappear, the score also changes to 0. Now finally, it's a fairly simple game to start off with. So we want some sort of enemy sprites. So we're going to choose a fiery dragon from the database within Scratch. So we're going to click on this button here that says choose new sprite from file. I'm going to, from this menu that you normally see, I'm going to click on fantasy and then I'm going to click on dragon with the flames coming out of his mouth. Now again, it's very, very large. Again, that doesn't necessarily matter because we're going to use the string tool and then going to reduce the size so that he's a more appropriate size, and then I'm going to move him into position. So I'm just going to move him there. Okay. Now, rather than creating all the sprite over again, all I want to do is drag this sprite on top of the dragon sprite, and can you see the little faint grey box that's appeared? Once that appears, you can just drop the code into that little box and the code appears here. Now, we're going to say that if it touches the Pacman sprite, rather than awarding the user a point, we're going to take some points off the user. So we're going to say, right, -3 points. Okay, now let's give this a little go to see what happens. So score is set to 0. We eat the black sprite, so we get awarded a point. When we touch the fiery dragon, it disappears, but we have 3 points deducted, so score is back down to 0. Now, to make it a little bit more complicated, we could get the dragon to actually move across the screen. So we could say, when green flag is clicked, forever, wait half a second, change X, which is horizontal, by 10, and then we're going to wait another half a second. I'm going to change X by -10. So essentially it's going to go backwards and forwards every half a second, and it's going to do that forever because we've given it a forever loop. And when we press the green flag every half a second, the dragon then starts to move. And obviously you can change X by whatever you want to change it by. It could be change X by 30 and by -30, or by 50 and -50. You can change Y, so it goes vertically rather than horizontally. That is a very basic Scratch game. You've learned enough in this tutorial today in order to create a fairly complicated Scratch game. Give it a go. Let's see what you are able to create. Okay, thanks for watching.